Holy exploitation, human trafficking hiding in plain sight. This is a story that needs to be told, a reality that demands our attention. Folks, we need to talk about something truly messed up, human trafficking. It's a dark, insidious crime that preys on the vulnerable. We know it's bad, but it gets worse. It's not just happening in the shadows, it's happening in places we consider sacred. It's happening right under our noses, disguised as religious work. The very institutions meant to provide solace and support are being infiltrated. Think about it. People devoted to their faith, often sent far from home, working for little or no pay. They believe they are serving a higher purpose. That's a recipe for exploitation, my friends. When devotion is manipulated, it becomes a tool for traffickers. This isn't some rare thing either, it's more common than we dare to admit. We're talking about nuns forced into domestic servitude. Women who have dedicated their lives to faith, reduced to unpaid labor. We're talking about young missionaries trapped in labor trafficking rings. Young souls full of hope, being exploited. And yes, we're talking about pastors themselves being exploited. Leaders who are supposed to guide, now victims themselves. This is happening in churches, temples, and mosques across the globe. No place of worship is immune. It's a global crisis hiding behind a veil of piety. From the smallest village to the largest city, no corner of the world is untouched. And the worst part, these victims are often too ashamed or afraid to speak out. They suffer in silence, believing they have no other choice. They've been told to be obedient, to trust religious authority. This trust is weaponized against them. Traffickers prey on this trust, twisting faith into a weapon of control. It's sickening. They exploit the very essence of what these individuals hold dear. It's time to shine a light on this darkness. We must expose these atrocities and stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. Vulnerable believers, easy prey for traffickers. Now you might be thinking, why religious workers, aren't they supposed to be taken care of? Well, that's the thing about assumptions, they're often wrong. See, many religious workers, especially those sent abroad, are incredibly isolated. They're far from their support networks, their families, even their language. They're dropped into unfamiliar cultures, often with little to no understanding of local laws or customs. And let's not forget about the power dynamics at play. Religious institutions often have strict hierarchies. Questioning authority, not really encouraged. Speaking out against abuse, forget about it. This power imbalance creates a breeding ground for exploitation. Traffickers know this. They use it to their advantage. Tricks of the trade: how traffickers exploit faith. So how do these scumbags operate? They're masters of manipulation, twisting religious teachings to justify their crimes. They tell victims it's their duty to obey, to sacrifice for the greater good. They use guilt, shame, even the threat of eternal damnation to keep them in line. Think about it. You're told you're doing God's work, saving souls, then you're forced to work 18-hour days, denied pay, and threatened with deportation. It's a nightmare scenario, and it's happening right now. And here's the kicker: traffickers often target vulnerable communities within religious groups. Immigrants, refugees, people desperate for a better life. They're promised visas, education, even a path to citizenship, but these promises are as empty as a politician's apology. Instead, they find themselves trapped in a web of exploitation, their faith used against them. Silence in the pews, the church's unholy blind spot. A troubling reality that many are unaware of. Now I know what you're thinking, surely religious institutions wouldn't stand for this, right? They are supposed to be sanctuaries of hope and compassion. Well, here's the thing. Sometimes even the holiest of places can be plagued by ignorance and denial. It's a harsh truth that we must confront. Look, I'm not saying all religious organizations are complicit. Many do incredible work in their communities, but there's a serious lack of awareness about human trafficking within these communities. It's an issue that often goes unnoticed or unaddressed. And even when there is awareness, there's often a culture of silence. This silence can be deafening and dangerous. Victims are afraid to speak out, fearing they won't be believed, or that they'll be blamed for their own exploitation. This fear is paralyzing. Religious leaders sometimes are more concerned with protecting the institution's reputation than protecting the vulnerable. This misplaced priority can have devastating consequences. This has got to change. We need a collective awakening and a commitment to action. Religious organizations need to step up, educate themselves, and create safe spaces for victims to come forward. Education and awareness are key. They need to stop sweeping this issue under the rug and start actively fighting against it. It's time for the church to be a beacon of hope and a force for good in this battle. Section 5, Legal Loopholes, where traffickers find sanctuary. Now, you might think, don't we have laws against this kind of thing? Surely, in a country with such a robust legal system, human trafficking should be a thing of the past, right? Well, yeah, on paper, sure. The laws exist, but they are often riddled with ambiguities and gaps that traffickers can easily navigate. But there are some gaping loopholes in our legal system that traffickers exploit like a preacher at a bake sale. These loopholes are not just minor oversights, they are significant gaps that provide a sanctuary for traffickers. See, many of the laws designed to combat human trafficking don't specifically address the unique vulnerabilities of religious workers. This oversight leaves a significant portion of the population at risk. For example, some religious visas have weaker worker protections, which means that individuals coming to the U.S. under these visas are more susceptible to exploitation, making it easier for traffickers to exploit people coming to the U.S. for religious purposes. These individuals often arrive with hopes and dreams, only to find themselves trapped in a nightmare. And because religious institutions often operate with a degree of autonomy, they can sometimes become unwitting sanctuaries for traffickers. It can be difficult for law enforcement to investigate allegations of abuse without facing accusations of religious persecution. This creates a complex situation where traffickers can hide behind the veil of religious freedom. We need stronger laws, folks. Laws that are not just written but are enforceable and effective in closing these dangerous loopholes. Laws that specifically address the issue of human trafficking within religious contexts. This is not just a legal issue, it's a moral imperative. Laws that close these loopholes and give law enforcement the tools they need to hold traffickers accountable. Only then can we hope to provide true sanctuary for those who need it most. Section 6. A glimmer of hope. Recent bills offer some protection. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. There are some glimmers of hope out there. Recently, some brave souls in Congress have introduced bills aimed at addressing this issue. These bills aim to strengthen protections for religious workers, increase funding for victim services, and hold traffickers accountable. For example, the Stopping Traffickers and Protecting the Exploited Act, STOP, would require religious organizations to provide training to staff on how to identify and prevent human trafficking. It would also create a new visa category for victims of trafficking who are willing to assist law enforcement in prosecuting their traffickers. These bills are a step in the right direction, but they're just a first step. We need to keep the pressure on Congress to pass these bills and to continue to strengthen our laws against human trafficking. Section 7. The clock is ticking. Congress must act now. This isn't a game, folks. This is about real people's lives. Every day that passes without meaningful action from Congress is another day that traffickers are free to exploit vulnerable individuals in the name of religion. We need Congress to stop dragging their feet and start taking concrete steps to address this issue. We need them to pass comprehensive legislation that provides stronger protections for religious workers, increases funding for victim services, and holds traffickers accountable. The clock is ticking, Congress. It's time to act. Section 8. Beyond legislation, resources, support, and awareness. But hey, it's not just on Congress to fix this. We all have a role to play. We need to raise awareness about this issue. Talk to your friends, your family, your book club, your sourdough starter. Make some noise. We also need to support organizations that are on the front lines of this fight. Groups that are providing shelter, legal aid, and counseling to survivors of human trafficking. Donate your time, your money, your old Beanie Babies, whatever you can spare. Every little bit helps. Section 9. What you can do. Join the fight against trafficking. Listen up, because this is important. You want to know how to spot the signs of human trafficking? Pay attention. Look for people who seem isolated, controlled, or afraid to speak for themselves. Look for signs of physical abuse, like bruises or injuries. And if someone tells you they're being trafficked, believe them. Don't be afraid to report it. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. You can also text HELP to be free, that's 233733. You might just save a life. Section 10. Amplify the message. Share, educate, advocate. This isn't something we can just ignore and hope it goes away. We need to keep talking about it. Keep shining a light on this darkness. Share this information with your networks. Educate yourselves and others about the signs of human trafficking. And for the love of all that is holy, Contact your elected officials and demand action. Tell them that this issue matters to you. Tell them that you won't stand for this any longer. Section 11. Their faith, our fight, protecting the vulnerable. Look, the bottom line is this. Every single person deserves to be free from exploitation. Religious freedom doesn't mean freedom to exploit. It's time we start treating it that way. We need to protect the vulnerable, regardless of their faith or background. Their faith, our fight. Let's do this.